Hi, and welcome to AIG Kids Lesson 6. This is Dr. Nancy. Last week we learned about the third C in our 7C series, catastrophe. A catastrophe in this usage is a sudden violent change in the earth. The flood of Noah's day changed the world. Let's get out our Bibles and open to Genesis 7. And let's find out, where did the flood waters come from? Genesis 7:11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, in the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Possibly there was a subterranean source of water, under the crust of the earth that God originally set up. It was released by violent volcanoes, by a splitting of the tectonic plates, causing huge tsunamis. Plus, for the first time, the heavens opened and rains fell 40 days and 40 nights. Remember, the original earth had no rain, only a mist, one landmass, and it must have been a different atmosphere to allow for such long lifespans for the animals and humans. Let's read what those waters did. Genesis 7:17. Now the flood was on the earth 40 days, and the waters increased and lifted up the ark, and it rose above the earth. And the waters prevailed and greatly increased on the earth. And the ark moved about on the surface of the waters. And the waters prevailed exceedingly on the earth, and all the high hills under the whole heaven were covered. The waters prevailed 15 cubits upward, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of life and the spirit of life. All that was on dry land died. So he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping things, birds of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. But Noah and those that were on the ark with him remained alive, and the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. The people and the animals and birds that were not on the ark, they all drowned, and violently. We can actually find remains of these animals, plants, and sea creatures that died during the flood in the ground. All that water would have picked up a lot of sand and gravel and laid them down in layers all over the earth. They would have been buried quickly, and we would find remains called fossils. There is more in-depth study in this coming up later in the series. Some people believe it takes a long, long time to form a fossil, but that's not true. It just takes the right conditions. A lot of water and mud. Fossil usually is the bony part of the animal, buried quickly in mud or lava because it preserves them from decay by air and water or from being eaten by other animals. Let's look at an illustration. Here we have a living fish, the animal before the flood, swimming along, and then now we have the flood and a massive mud, layers of it, kill the fish. If it died without the mud, it would be eaten up or decayed, and there would be no remains, not even the bones. But being quickly covered in mud layers, the bony part remains in rock layers, and it becomes a fossil. The mud and sediment in the water also form rock layers. We find it around the world. You can even see it in the Grand Canyon. Noah's flood was a catastrophe. It was so bad it destroyed everything, including the Garden of Eden. The water pressure from the flood, which lasted about a year, broke apart the land into many continents, pushing up great mountains and valleys of basins, reshaping the earth to what we have today. Let's see what happened to the ark, though, after a year of floating around. Go to Genesis chapter 8. Then God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him on the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided, and the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were also stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained, and the waters receded continually from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the waters decreased. Then the ark rested in the 7th month, in the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month, and the 1st day of the month on the tops of the mountains were seen. Did you know that on many of the mountaintops today, including Mount Everest, there are rock layers with sea fossils in them? That shows us that they were once underwater, just like the Bible teaches. Let's see what Noah did when the ark finally settled. We are in Genesis chapter 8, verse 6. So it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the ark and the windows that he had made. Then he sent out a raven, which kept going to and fro until the waters had dried up from the earth. He also sent out for himself a dove to see if the waters had receded from the face of the ground. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot. So she returned to the ark to him, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand and took her and drew her into the ark. And he waited yet another 7 days. And again he sent the dove out. Then the dove came to him in the evening, and behold, a freshly plucked olive leaf was in her mouth. And Noah knew that the waters had receded from the earth. So he waited yet another 7 days, and sent out the dove, which did not return again to him. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the 1st month, in the 1st day of the month, that the waters were dried up from the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and indeed the surface of the ground was dry. And in the 2nd month and the 27th day of the month, the earth was dried. Then God spoke to Noah, saying, Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and cattle and creeping things that creep on the earth, so that they may abound on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So Noah went out with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Every animal, every creeping thing, every bird, and whatever creeps on the earth according to their families went out of the ark. Why didn't Noah just open the ark as soon as they landed on Mount Ararat? You know, I'll bet he was waiting for God, just as he always did. God shut the door. God warned and protected him. God knew when to open the door. So Noah waited on God. What is the first thing you would have done? Noah thanked God. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord and took every clean animal and every clean bird and offered a burnt offering on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. So God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be on every beast of the earth and every bird of the air and all that move on the earth and all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you these things, even the green herbs, but you shall not eat flesh that with its life, that is its blood. Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. From the hand of every beast I will require it, from the hand of man. From the hand of every man's brother I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. And as for you, be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly on the earth and multiply it. Noah thanked God by setting up an altar and offering a sacrifice. God blessed Noah and his family and gave them a specific command. Do you remember what it was? Look at Genesis 1:9. It says, "Go out, have children and families, and occupy the earth, which now has many continents." He also changed what man could eat. He used to eat only fruits and vegetables, remember? How many of you eat meat, like hamburgers and chicken? Now mankind is given permission to hunt and eat meat as long as it is not alive or have blood in it. Now God goes and makes a promise to Noah and to all generations, which includes us. Let's look at that in Genesis 9, verse 8 to 13. Then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, "As for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with all your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, the beasts of the earth are with you, and all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth. Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth." And God said, "This is a sign of my covenant, which I make with me and you, and every living creature that is with you for perpetual generation. I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth." What is a covenant? It is a promise that can't be broken. God's promises to Noah that he will never destroy the earth by flood, and that promise is for all generations. The sign he put up on the sky was a rainbow, God's promise to mankind. You know, some people believe the Bible teaches that the flood was only a small flood in a small area. Sometimes people who live by rivers have their homes flooded when it rains too much, or a hurricane raises the water levels. But if Noah's flood was only a local event, it would seem God's word would be wrong. There are other problems with this idea. Why would Noah have to build an ark? He could run to higher ground. Why would the animals and birds have to go in the ark? They could do the same thing. And God's judgment would not have been complete, which makes this promise not true. But we have much evidence, especially the worldwide fossil record, that says God's biblical record is in fact true. Plus, Jesus refers also to Noah's flood as a fact. Your memory verse for today is Genesis 9:11. "Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth." Remember the command in Genesis 9:1 where he told Noah and his family to fill the earth? This will come up next week in the fourth C, confusion. Listen to the flood song to help you remember the evidence of the worldwide flood, and have a blessed day.